two, one. Let's go ahead and we'll let the room populate here. There we go. Welcome, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Layson Perkins with Virtual Coaches Clinic. Right now we're working with Basketball Embassy for these new sessions that have been going on, and very excited to have Kostas Chattakristos back with us to discuss return to play strategies. Well, we really enjoyed having Kostas recently for one of our first clinics, and I thought this was a very interesting topic because we all, as coaches, at some point will have players that are coming back from an injury and wanting to make sure that we have a great strategy and a great way to help them get back to be able to operate at 100%, both mentally and physically. So, Kostas, I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to you now and let you take this over. And again, thank you so much for being part of this.
Well, thank you for having me. This is my second time here, and I really enjoyed the first one. And today we're going to be talking in a little bit of a more specialized topic, which is return to play after an injury. And I know this is kind of generic. It can be any type of injury. An injury can keep you out for a day or two or for months, and hopefully is going to be, for everybody wishes it's going to be a short term absence, but that's not always the case. Knowing that, but a lot of coaches that attend this clinic are basketball coaches and not strength and conditioning coaches or rehab specialists. I'm gonna keep it kind of like generic. I'm not gonna go to too much detail regarding physiology and mechanisms and exceptions and things like that. I'm just going to lay out our basic strategy and thinking process and methodology. How when we have to deal with a player coming back from injury. And from those who don't know me, and most of you probably, I've been in basketball most of my life, and I started out from doing my master's degree at the University of Texas, and then kept working on basketball teams and colleges. And the last 6 years, I've been the head of performance at CSKA Moscow, working with Coach Itoudis. For those of you who follow European basketball. And I've been around enough to see our role as strength and conditioning coaches change from, the professionals that are in charge of getting people stronger and doing the warm up to a little more sophisticated role of, tracking performance and consulting the head coach and the management, dealing with technology and being statisticians and researchers at the same time, and also taking care of injuries. As we will see, our role in this process is big and has grown even more the last few years, and to the point where I think that we're looking at a new breed of coaches that are going to be both physios and strength coaches, because they have to deal with the human body as a unity, as one. And like I said, we have been involved much more in rehabbing injuries, which are unfortunately, they're inevitable. We all know that. As long as we play basketball, there's going to be injuries, and the game has become more intense. It has become faster, and the game density has increased also in European basketball. It was also always high up in the NBA. High school sometimes has a very condensed schedule, so guys and girls and players are exposed out there much more than they used to, so the injuries are inevitable. And again, we all understand that injuries bear a high cost. The first one is to the athlete himself or herself, because they lose their the spot, and they're in pain and they're anxious and all that. But when a player leaves and cannot practice or cannot play because of injury, the players that remain back get more loaded. So that makes sense, because if you have 3 guards and now you have 2 guards, and you can rotate all 3 of them in the game, so they'll get more playing time. Also, they're going to get more time in practice because you don't have subs, and this needs special attention. That's the first point I want to make. Take care of the people that stay behind. You might want to practice less or with more breaks, or somehow modify your approach so you don't overload the players that remain. Short term, and that's purely empirical, and it's not based on research. Sometimes when a player gets hurt, the person that subs for him or her plays better. So you got the subs or the number 3 person on your rotation playing great, probably because they get confidence and they know they're not going to get subbed because there's no one else to play. And then you get them to play better. And I've seen that time and again. But overall, we have seen also good performances in the first few games, and then a series of other injuries in players that play the same position, which means that these guys or girls were injured probably because they were overloaded over time. So load on the remaining players is huge. Team cohesion is a big one. Obviously, you have to play with the different rotation, put players in different positions, and the positions they're not very used to playing. You play your fives as fours, and your point guards are two guards, and the team cohesion gets messed up. And if that continues, then the team has a serious problem. And we've seen that, and it has a big effect on the bottom line, obviously, winning or losing, which this is what we're here for. And we've seen seasons being destroyed and careers being destroyed, coaching careers, because of injuries. So it is an important part, not to leave out the dollar or the euro, wherever you are, or whatever coin you get paid or pay. So there's a big cost of injury. There's been studies in the NBA and in the Premier League that's talking about hundreds of millions of dollars sometimes, because the way you calculate is not only the calculation of the medical bills that you have to pay, and the specialists and the medicine and what have you. It's also the fact that you're paying very big contracts sometimes for players to be sidelined, and that's money lost. You're paying. You have an asset that is just sitting there, and it's not good financially. It doesn't make any sense. So now our role is once an injury happens is to bring him back healthy. So injury is regarded as any event that will leave the player out of official practice. So if you're not practicing 100%, you're injured. If you're practicing and you are in pain, you're not injured statistically. So day one is the day of your injury, is the day that you stayed out of practice. And the first day that you can practice fully, we stop counting the injury time and days, or however everybody measures, we count days. But my first, I'm sure you came back when you play an official game. And return to play refers to all the actions and the strategies and the decision that needs to be made throughout that process. So the player comes back to the competition, and I will add, as fast as possible, because that is another big thing. And when you work with doctors that don't have experience with sports, they just tend to prolong the time that they prescribe for athletes to stay out. For example, you have a muscle tear, average second grade, which we are going to be talking about today, by the way. Second grade muscle tear will keep you out for about 20 to 25 days, where the average doctor will say a month, because they always want to have, they want to have a little bit of a pillow over there if something goes wrong, and why not stay 1 more week more? But for us, this could be 3 games. This would be the difference between getting to the Final Four or winning our championship. This week is 3 games. It could be 4 games. We need players to be back as fast as possible, and that's a thin line to walk, because it's always better to have more time and go slower than pushing it to the edge. So we're always at the edge. We push as much as we can so players don't get injured, and that's both an art and a science. And I'm going to be talking about our strategy down this presentation. Now, here's the coach coming back once there's this unfortunate event happens, and asks the $1 million question. So when is the player going to be back? And then for my answer, because in this team, I'm responsible of communicating with, I'm the in-between between the medical and the coaching staff. So I have to knock on the door and look at the coach who's not happy, because he knows I'm going to be the bearer of some bad news. And depending on what I say, it can be this. So coach is really happy, or it could be this. The coach is really mad because I tell him, you know what, this guy needs to stay out for 2 months. And that is always a tough moment, but we have to be prepared as professionals to give the right information to coaches, and coaches must be educated. And that is something that everyone should, I think, kind of like, if you're a basketball coach, you have to get educated to be able to speak the same language as your staff. For example, there are coaches that, let me backtrack a little bit. Every individual reacts to injury in a different way. So you sprain your ankle and your ankle gets super inflamed and swells up, and mine doesn't. Some people react differently to swelling. Their, athletes have different pain tolerance. Some can play through pain, some cannot. Some have faster healing times. You see great improvement day by day. Others heal slower, and depending on the injury. So the question, when will he be back, is, I think probably we think, and that makes my coach very, very mad, because then he starts asking question, why? But I understand him, is right to be mad and very demanding, and I like that. But we have to understand that we have to be, respecting the injury and the individual, let's say, response to each injury. And it is a process. It is a continuum. It is a process. You go from injury to rehab, and then there's training, and then there's the game. It's not, injury, training, game, or injury, rehab, game. It's a continuum. We just kind of visualize like that. The road is never straight like the arrows pointed. It's probably more like that. You start, where's my pointer? Okay, you start, okay, let's make it red. All right, so you start here, you think you're gonna go there, but there's this pain. Oh, I'm feeling better. Okay, now we're progressing. Oh, I felt pain in a different part of my body because I was sitting around for too long, and then boom, and then the game is somewhere over here. I chop off the head of this guy. But this is how the process usually goes. It's very rarely is straight, and we're going to talk about it later on. And now what I've added in this slide is that over here, once the injury happens, we have to understand that it's a dual process. One is the medical one, and one is the training, right? So you go, and they progress, they go hand in hand. So a lot of coaches and a lot of specialists, unfortunately, think that, okay, let's finish with the therapy with the physio or the doctor, and then you go on to training. No, it's a continuum, like I said, and like we're going to see in the following slides, training and treatment go hand in hand. They happen at the same time. Is just change we just change the focus. So in the beginning, obviously, you want more treatment, and then you want more training. At the end is all training until you go play. But this is something that we need to understand. So especially if you're a doctor, and a lot of doctors say, okay, well, you got hurt. Well, let's rest for 10 days until it gets better. No, that's wrong. If you have a knee problem, you'll train the rest of the body. Okay. If you have a muscle tear in one part of your body, you can train the rest of the body. There's never sit around. There's so many things you can do. And doctors sometimes, and athletes listen to doctors, and coaches listen to doctors, and said, oh, the doctor said that. And because the doctors are obviously the heads of departments, and they have a high status, and they know their stuff, and they deal with the human life, basically, they carry a lot of weight. So if the doctor says, you sprain your ankle, you just sit out for a week, then it's very hard for me to convince the player that, let's hop on the bike and do something that is not painful. So it's a continuum. At the first, as we will see from the first moment of injury, you need to start doing something. The part of training, the retraining after physiotherapy and after therapy and after the athlete stops hurting, what we call post-rehab training, I put it here as training, is often omitted. And I've seen it time and again. Somebody goes, gets injured, finishes up the physiotherapy. The physio says, okay, we strengthen that ankle, he's ready to go. And then the next day, she dresses up, goes to practice, boom, hour into practice, muscle tear. Why? Because the body was not ready, right? Or that injured limb got re-injured. And that is the biggest danger, that if you don't do what you're supposed to be doing to prepare yourself to go to the game, then the injury rate is going to be much higher. And it's actually recorded in research how it increases more, even at 4 times the chance. So somebody that didn't go through that part here, the medical the training part between game and medicine, they have as much as 4 times a higher rate of re-injury than people that are healthy. So it's very important part, and you understand why. You have to get the body back into shape. Simple as that. Very often omitted, and we have to persuade. We have to push for the coaches and the players to understand that because you're not hurting anymore, you're not ready to play. You need to retrain, right? And the way it goes, it's especially lately in the later years. That's why we added a lot of professionals in our staff. It's a teamwork. So once something happens up here on the left, You need a diagnosis and an initial prognosis, and that is being done by the doctor. One point here, because I think it's a little bit of a value to hear what's happening in real life, and not only what's happened, what the research says. But in our team, when somebody gets hurt, we take him to the doctor. If it's something more serious, we take him to a specialist. So orthopedics, or what, if he has, most problems are orthopedic problems, and they get an initial diagnosis and an initial prognosis. If they have to do an MRI, they do an MRI. We'll talk about it later on, the value of all these things. And we make a point not to inform the player right away. And that is counter medical, I think. It just counters the medical orthodoxy, I might say, that the patient needs to know what they have, and honesty and ethics, the Hippocrates oath, all that. But many times the athletes don't understand exactly what the doctor means. So if the doctor say, the first question is, how long I'm going to stay out, right? How long I'm going to be out for? These injuries go, for, the doctor says, from 15 to 20 days. Or is it 15 or 20? 15, the athletes normally don't listen. They listen to 20. And we have to go back and explain to the athlete that it can be 15, it can be 12, it can be 18. So we're going to work every day and we'll see what happens. But if the athlete listens to the doctor, that's the opinion that he's going to go with. And if the doctor is a specialist outside the team, that they don't really care about the team, or they just want to play it safe, then there's a problem. So we make sure that they tell us first, and then we tell the doctor. And here's where our ethics go in, and we will never push a player to play that is not ready to play. We'll never lie to the player. We just explain things in a different way and explain better, so they can understand what we mean, and we can all stay on the same page regarding his treatment, which is going to be, the treatment plan is going to be decided by two more people. It's actually not two, we're more in CSCA. The physio and the strength coach, we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about the treatment plan and how we're going to go about it better. And then comes the tough part of telling coach. We know that, and after we tell coach and everybody decides what to do, we go in and we start implementing the rehab process, right? So we can have the strength coach, the physio, and later on in the process, the coach will come in, and because we need to work on the court, and then the player gets back, right? This is kind of the general approach to whatever we do regarding rehabilitation, and you see it relies heavily on teamwork. And you would think that ideally this will work in like a well-oiled machine, and it's rarely the case. In professional basketball, the stories that I've listened to, because people, all these professionals sometimes come back from different backgrounds. So I come from a different school of thought, and the doctor comes from a different school of thought. Unfortunately, staff cohesion is a problem. But this is how it should go, and this is pretty much how it goes in our club. And so many people are involved in rehab. Let's go through some principles that we have. Let's say some general philosophy that guides our approach to rehabs. The first one is, you have to keep in mind that you rehab the whole body and you don't rehab a limb. And this is something that medical professionals have a hard time understanding. That, like I mentioned before, when I say the player's ready to go back, I don't mean that the ankle or the muscle tear is not hurting. I mean that he's fully capable of sustaining the load and playing an official game. On the other hand, I have to think global. I have to think about the whole body, and then I have to act local, which means that I have to go back to the limb that was hurt and do all the necessary techniques and strategies and therapies to get that limb functioning back and integrated with the rest of the body, right? We talk about exercise progression, which is the key to success. If you keep anything from this talk, you have to keep that we have to follow certain progression. And this is pretty much self-explanatory. Yes, for sure, somebody that got hurt, he or she cannot go back directly to play. You will see here on the left side is a hypothetical loading scale, and here are the actual phases down on the x-axis, the actual phases that we use. And this line here, the blue line, shows how intensity, volume, and load must be distributed. In every phase, you have to increase just a little bit in every day that you work with the athlete, you have to increase just a little bit the load and the complexity and the difficulty. So there's gradual adaptation. Many times, the loading doesn't follow that path, and they start slow and then they increase very fast. There's a plateau because there's pain. Increase, plateau, down, plateau, and it goes like this just because we don't follow the right progressions, right? And the common mistake, especially in season, is overloading. So the athlete feels good, reports no pain, so we assume he's ready or she's ready to play. But as we'll see down the road, that's not the case. And in reality, it follows a path like this. Is you start loading in the beginning. Sometimes because of what we did the day before, there's pain here. And then you have to back up a little bit, back down, and decrease the load and the intensity. After that, over here, they feel better. You go back up, and you have to play with progressions and regressions the whole time, based on pain, soreness, and the confidence that the athlete has. Of course, there's also objective measures. You palpate, you see swelling and things like that. So these measures also, these landmarks guide us to increase or decrease the intensity. Communication is a huge one. I just mentioned the coach. He needs to be, or she needs to be, informed the whole time. I make sure to update everybody. We have a system that we communicate between us, and I post whatever needs to be posted over there. I'm keeping everybody on track, even if, and this is a very tough time and challenging to say that things got worse, because everybody's counting days, and then you have to go in and say, you know what, we have a little bit of a problem today. The athlete feels more pain, so we have to go back and add more days to the return date. But communication with the coach, communication with the athlete himself or herself is huge, and it's one of the biggest parts of getting somebody back is to deal with their psychology and the confidence, and be honest. I'd like to keep my athletes informed about anything that is happening, about the state of that they are in, about the problems we're facing, the severity. I'm honest. I'm not brutal, but I tell them the truth. And trust between the healer and the patient is huge. And there's a lot of research out, and experience points out that the healing process will be accelerated if the patient believes in the doctor. Just by that belief. It's placebo, I don't know what it is, but you do have to have a great communication with the athlete and gain their trust that you do know what you're doing, and you are telling them the truth. Okay. And also there's the management that is involved, that's paying everyone, and they want to know what's going on and when their star is going to come back. So it is you have to find different language and different way to approach each of these parts. And then you have to obviously communicate with the rest of the medical staff and how things are going, and make decisions, right? And this is the last point. And we'll see at the last slide, one of the last slides, how we make the decision to bring somebody back. But it's not someone's opinion. It's a well thought out process. It has to be based on some objective measures and some subjective opinions. But this is the moment of truth when you decide, and you put your signature in whatever paper. It's a hypothetical paper for somebody to return to action, and that they're going to remain healthy. And let's check out a video that we're talking about muscle tears. This is something that it's a video from 2017. Look at number 1. Oh, okay. You can hear the you hear somebody injury, right? So we had a catastrophic muscle. Look, you can hear the here, right? So that was a video from one of our playoff games. I think it's 2 years ago, and our player over here is Nando De Colo, that got hurt, and he cost us a lot. He stayed out for 3 weeks, and you can actually hear him as he goes down the court chasing the offense. That you can hear him saying, "Oh, he got hurt." Stayed out for a while, came back 5 days before the Final Four, not quite ready, and the team didn't play well, and we lost the semifinals. So it was terrible, and it was a muscle tear, and the way we go about treatment and diagnosing muscle tears, like I said, it's not a physiology, let's say, clinic, but I'm going to go ahead and just share with you how we deal with an injury once it happens. And muscle tears can be roughly categorized in 3 different, actually that we use this grading system of grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. There's another system that we use more recently, is the Munich system that has more grades in it. But for simplicity, we will use grade 1, intact muscle, really small damage. Grade 2, connective tissue and muscle fibers torn, complete tear of grade 3. Most of the tears we get are 1 and 2. Occasionally we get a grade 3, but most of them are right over here at grade 1 and grade 2. Diagnosis, we look at the clinical picture. Is it swollen? Is it painful on palpation and on movement? We look at the mechanism of injury. Over here in that video that I just showed you was obvious. The athlete sprints. The muscle tear happens when the hamstring is trying to stop the tibia from extending. So it happens in a very classic way. The athlete immediately touches the spot that is painful. You can tell that something happened over there. And we go on a clinical examination, all the tests that we need to do. We do muscle tests, see how much strength the athlete has lost. Then we go ahead and have an MRI, consult with an orthopedist, and if needed, we send it out to get a second opinion, because very often things are not very clear of location, of extension, even if sometimes it's not clear if you have a muscle tear or not. And MRIs must be used with caution, and we'll talk about it a little bit later on. And then we sit around and we talk about what we're going to do about that. So this is the process. It's not just, hey, I think I have a muscle tear, MRI, go. It's a more complex and more elaborate process to diagnose a muscle tear. And here's what happens to the muscle once it gets hurt, right? So talking about mostly grade 1 muscle tears, you don't have such an extensive tear of the connective tissue, but grade 2 you do. In any case, you do have muscle fibers and muscle cells that have lost their continuity. And you can see here, day 1 and 3 is called a destruction phase. Basically, this is the time when the muscle fibers are torn. And you can see over here, there's a lot of cells that come in, those little guys over here, and try to clean the area up and remove all the debris. And at the same, this is start of the inflammation process, which is a process that helps us heal. And then there's certain cells here, it's called the satellite cells, that starts migrating to the location of the injury. And then later on the next few days, we have the repair phase. You have the connective tissue, the collagen, and the muscle fibers start to bridge, to connect, right? And those satellite cells form into myotubes, and they become muscle fibers down the road of the healing process. And we have the remodeling process. You start at day 1, roughly 3 days, roughly another 5 days, and then from day 10 to 21, you do get this remodeling here. And you can see this is muscle, right? The muscle fibers are blending together, creating new muscle, but you do have collagen here. And this is the scar tissue that you probably heard of. If you're a coach or if you're a strength coach, you definitely have worked with it. And this needs to go away and be as smooth as possible down here to really be able to strengthen the muscle and don't leave any weak spots. Scar tissue is a problem in rehab. It has been blamed for a lot of re-injuries and problems that we face during therapy. It must be dealt with in the beginning of the process. So this is kind of the process that the muscle follows before after an injury. And why is that important? It's important because it will guide us to tell us what exactly we're going to be doing during rehab. And what I did here on the right-hand side on the slide, I want you to visualize how the tissue looks once you get hurt. It looks like this. So there's an injury, there's inflammation, there's no connectivity in the muscle fiber, so you can't really stress that muscle. If you stress the muscle at this point, it will tear more. So you have to provide enough time to heal, right? You don't touch that part. You got to give psychological support, like I said before. You have to really be by the player, because the first few days after an injury, if the injury is serious, and if the time of the season that it happens is critical, let's say before a final or before the playoffs, I've seen athletes go into depression. So you have to stand by, and ideally, if you have somebody that is a specialist close by, that's great. If not, don't disregard the psychological state that the athlete is in. The fact that they come in and they smile doesn't mean they're doing okay. Most of them in more serious injuries don't sleep at night, and they have, they are nervous. Their appetite sometimes gets lost, so they just constantly think about their injury, go online and try to find answers, which is sometimes terrible because they just start getting crazy with all these opinions out there. So psychological support is huge. We don't do any exercises for the injured limb. So let's say you have a hamstring tear. We don't really do nothing on that back side of the muscle. We just let it to the doctor, do whatever and the physio do whatever they are about to do. And we don't do any exercise for that injured part, but we do train the rest of the body. And that's something that I stressed in the beginning of my talk, that once you're hurt, if you have your calves or you have a calf tear or anything, you have to work out the rest of the body, right? The longer you stay inactive, the harder it's going to be to come back. So again, this is where the art and the science get into play. You have to find a way to train the body, right? So phase 2 is, the time goes by on day 4 until day 8, 7, or 9. Again, this is just an example. We never know how each athlete is going to react. You see here, the muscle is starting to heal, to make some connections, and it just is just normal and natural and logical that we don't want to make this muscle work hard and start contracting and lengthening, because it's going to tear up again. So when you do train the rest of the body, we do start with light exercise, especially positional isometrics with limited range of motion. So we don't want this muscle to be completely inactive anymore. We want to fight the inhibition that this injury created. And if you listen to my last talk in strength training, we do get muscle inhibition because of injury. So the whole muscle now is not working correctly, let's say, neurologically. And we do want to start fighting that back, but with limited range of motion and low load exercises. Isometrics can be a very low load exercise. It doesn't require a lot of lengthening and shortening of the muscle. We make sure we don't overextend that limb. We start doing light stretching, mainly because if you see those lines over here, these are the collagen fibers that are starting to connect again. Ideally, these lines should not be facing, following these random directions. They should be aligned with a line of force. And that's why we use certain techniques of stretching, that contraction release, or not just passive stretching, but somebody that doesn't know those techniques, just stretch a little bit. But the big let's say our rule is that it should be pain-free. Anything that we do on the limb should be pain-free. A little bit of stretch is okay, but once it starts hurting and burning, you have to stop. You push too far, you got to go back. But you do have to start working with that limb. Neuromuscular electrical stimulation, NMES. The most common is Compex. We use a device called Compex. This is the electrodes that you put on your leg and it just contracts. It's becoming fashionable now for fitness as well. It's electrical stimulation because we can't load the muscle, but we want the muscle to contract. That's a good device and there's other brands out there that you can use. Just look for neuromuscular electrical stimulation. It's becoming a trend now. Also, we always use that, but now it's more popular. And we start with bicycle and light jogging. The newer approach to muscle tears, it's, you have to start moving as fast as possible. You have to work with a to load that injured tissue without pain. You have to apply loads because the fibers are the muscle and the collagen fibers are going to be aligned, and also the rest of the body is not going to be inactive, and that will speed up the process, right? Um, Basketball wise, I like to bring the players out on the court as soon as possible. So as soon as the first 3 days go by, where let's say the hamstring is torn and the player feels pain upon walking and going off the stairs, once that's gone, and usually it's gone on the 3-4th day, I take guys up on the court. I say, put your basketball shoes on, dress up, we'll go on the court, get a ball or 2 balls, and let's go up. Why? Because I want them to feel like basketball players. A. B, I want them to feel active. And 3, and very important, they cannot lose their touch with the ball. They need to start, they need to remain, they need to start to continue shooting, dribbling, and all that. So drills that I use: in place dribbling, 2-ball drills, handling, no movement. Even if you have a calf muscle tear, which is a little different than the hamstring, you can stay in place and, work your ass off doing dribbling work. Dribbling with short step movement. So, imagine those stutter steps that you just slightly move to the right, slightly move to the left. The limb doesn't have to move that far in terms of range of motion. The load is not that high. If there's no pain, you can do it. Good exercise for conditioning. Spot up shots, you walk from position to position, but you take your shots up, shoot as many as the player can shoot. Free throws, and all, obviously low intensity work. Anything else that you can think of that is low intensity? No layups, no fake and drive, no explosive movements, no running in this phase, right? Criteria for progression to the next phase, and I put this slide only once because this is kind of what we use to go from one theoretical phase to the other theoretical phase. Like I said, everything is a continuum. No pain on movement or after exercise. So how do you know if you did too much? Well, how do you pick your exercises? Well, I pick my exercises thinking about what state is that tissue in. So I just pointed at those slides. Is it half torn? Is it healing? Well, okay, well, I'm going to use exercises that have low intensity and limited range of motion, and I'm going to use the intensity that I feel it's suitable. Well, how do I know if I did too much? Well, the next day will tell you. Maybe the same day will tell you. Hopefully, you're not going to do any damage. But the athlete might come back and say, you know what we did yesterday kind of hurt me, or my muscles are sore, and probably we did too much. So if there's no pain and after exercises or movement, there's no swelling after exercise, and if the athlete is confident, and that is a huge point there, we have to trust our athletes, and we have to respect their opinions. We progress to the next level. Obviously, there's medical objective measures as well. For example, pain and palpation, feeling if there's a lump, and see if the range of motion got decreased. And we all take these into account. But pain on movement and after exercise, swelling and athlete feeling is very important to progress to the next phase, which is the intensification phase, which is going to be, days 10 to 17 or something like that. We continue to exercise the rest of the body. You can see now there's more healing involved over here. It could be in any different state of, it could be more heal or less heal. We don't really know, but we continue exercising the rest of the body. Now we go in full range of motion exercises. We do strength in full range of motion now. So you squat full range. Sorry about that. I apologize. So sorry about that. So we're going and do our strength training. Obviously, we avoid loading the injured part too much, right? We started introducing jumps, low intensity. We can do squat jumps. We can do lateral bounds. Nothing. There's no, let's say, high speed movement. We try to protect the limb. But we do introduce biomechanically and neurally all the jumps. And we start running not only linearly, which is the start of every rehab program. We start changing directions. We start doing curls and slides, back pedals, and trying to explore all planes of motion of movement, right? So basketball wise, we start jogging with the ball. We do low intensity change of direction, so you can dribble down the court, doing reverse dribble between the legs, behind the back, and all types of basketball movements. But again, the intensity is low. The tissue is not ready to tolerate high speeds and high loads. We're doing spot jump shots. We jog from spot to spot. Start doing light layups. Dribble, go to the hoop. Different types of layups, Euro steps. Again, the intensity is not maximum. We start doing defensive slides on a higher intensity, because especially in the hamstring is not too involved. Also in calf tears, this is something that you can use to build up your conditioning and to really increase the level of work that you do. Defensive slides are a little bit safer to load. And then you move on to phase 4. 4 is anything after day 18, 19, where we start gradually build up the capacity to try to build up the capacity to tolerate a full official game. You can see down here that the tissue is almost healed. This healing is going to go on for a while. Sometimes in the MRIs, you can see liquid even a month and a half later while the athlete is playing. So the healing is almost complete. Let's say we're going to strength training is full. We focus on conditioning. Now we can use a little bit higher speeds of running and movement. So we start focusing on conditioning before we allow somebody to play in official practice. Doing drills on the court always with the ball. This is what I like to do. I don't like to be going outside too much and running on football fields and things like that. And then we gradually bring intensity close to the maximum in anything that we do. COD here is changes of direction, agility drills, decision drills, speed work, going back from, just doing skips and working on technique, trying to increase the intensity almost to 100%. And then jumps are obviously more intensive, either with balls, let's say layups, or just as part of our strength training, doing plyos, doing box jumps. We start going to full intensity because we want the athlete to be ready to participate in the full practice. Basketball, we start putting in one-on-one drills and two-on-two drills. Start putting an opponent, try to get the mind of the athlete away from the injury and the fact that they're doing rehab, trying to make them think more like basketball players. We're going to full speed shooting, full court drills, getting out of screens, pick and rolls, things like that. Stop and go movements, decisions, close to maximum layups, meaning you step, try to dunk, go as hard as you can, report of any pain or soreness. And then comes the last part of it. The last part of the process is, well, how do we decide if this athlete is ready to go? And there's no 100% test that will tell you, well, this guy's going to go in, is never going to get hurt again. No, it's a collective process. And actually, it's a collective decision. And the thinking goes like this: we don't want any pain, obviously, on palpation or on movement. And when I say movement here, it's 100%. No swelling, obviously. We have objective tests according to each injury. For example, if you have an ACL, you can do the hop test, you can do balance test, you can do Cybex, or it's a dynamometry. Performance test, definitely recommended if someone is being out for more than 20 days or a month. Yo-yo test or any type of test that will tell you what kind of physical condition this athlete is in. Our rule is that you have to complete 2 full practices before an official game. The first official practice is going to be is not going to be full. So if we practice for an hour and a half, or hour 15, you practice for 45 minutes and you go out. I've seen athletes get hurt when they, go from this process that I just described and they do a full practice over an hour, and they over an hour, it's dangerous. I've seen people getting hurt just because they were on the court more time than they supposed to. Second practice must be full. Third, let's say, activities official game. That's what I meant in the beginning of my talk when I said that we're at the edge. We need to bring players as fast. Why not train somebody for a week before they play an official game? The logical thing to do, but in reality, you might be playing a very, very important game 3 days from now and you have to have 2 practice in a game, or you have a game in 5 days from now and you want them to play a game before that crucial game, so they're in rhythm. So but you cannot go from rehab to game. If you don't practice, you don't play. And the sixth important thing that I touched on before, it's also athletes' confidence. You have to take that into account. There's sometimes that you're medically cleared, everything's clear, strength coach, physio, doctor, they say, nothing is wrong, everything looks great, but the athlete doesn't feel ready. And they say, well, you know what, I want to maybe not to practice. They go slower, they protect themselves, and you can't go around that. And people get angry and they get anxious, and they tend to be defensive. I mean, physios and doctors, and they say the athlete's fine, but the athlete doesn't feel ready. And you have to respect the athlete's feeling, and you can't go around it. You can't force somebody to play. You can't force them to be okay. And I've seen cases that players did dress up and just didn't give any effort, or just didn't play their maximum because they were afraid, they were not ready. Better to leave the player out, show them that you respect them, and also protect the team from a player that comes in and is not ready to play. But there's the rule, at least in our team, is that we prefer to play with the players that are ready, healthy, 100%, and not risk somebody that is not, right? So you have to respect the process. When something happens, respect the process, all of it, meaning training, the training part, the physio part, the diagnostic part, and the fact that the athlete needs its time or her time to get back. Don't rush. If one message that I want to convey today is don't rush. Respect the process, go through the process. And unfortunately, injuries happen, and they will take some time to get players back. Sometimes it's months after an ACL, for example, injury, anterior cruciate ligament. And obviously, returning to action from such a big injury and staying out for 10 months is quite different from what I described. But again, you get through these phases, but they're obviously a lot longer. And you do have just as a pointer, something to think about is if you stay out and you stay out of action and immobility for more than a month or two, you have to spend more time preparing the rest of the body, not only the injured limb, to return to action. Because when the body's not loaded, the tissues get weaker, let's say. So they lose all the adaptations that allow them to sustain load, right? So longer periods of absence, longer periods of rehab, more training, more preparation, more progression, right? So word about MRIs, because they became, whoever gets hurt, let's do an MRI. Coaches think it's a photograph of what's going on inside. Is clear, 100% sure measure of diagnosis. Everybody needs them. Everybody asks for them, but they have limited value of prognosing how long somebody's going to stay out after a muscle tear, for example. And they have limited value in assessing if somebody is healthy to come back. And it's a very logical, very, very logical question for somebody that doesn't know, to say, hey, before we put somebody in after a muscle tear, let's have an MRI, see if he's healed or she's healed. It doesn't work like that. It's very hard to see from an MRI if the athlete is healing. And there's research out that points out that MRIs are very unreliable to decide if somebody's ready to go play. We need to rely with clinical and performance measures to make that decision. Be very cautious when somebody says, oh, the MRI is clear, you can play. You have to take into account many more things besides the MRI. They're useful, but they must be used with caution. Now, closing this, before we close, I want to say that often there's a conflict of interest between the team and the player. And we're kind of here in between those fists, because you have to, the number one priority is people's health, no question, right? But we do have to push this line that I just talked about and convince the athlete that it's not 100% safe to play. You have higher chances of injury if you play in 2 days than in 6 days. But we have this game and you have to play. Never have I pushed or retain any information from players that could hurt them. I never pushed anybody to play that it was dangerous. But we are in between. The team is always pushing for players to play, and players are always a little bit skeptical if it's the right time. We are in between, and we have to take care of both. My job is closer to the team, but I never lie to the players, never pushed anybody to play. when they were sick, right? When they were injured. And closing this presentation, I just want to, it's a little sad of a moment. If I can dedicate anything, or I just say my thought goes to our doctor, Roman Abzelilov, who sadly passed away on May 16th, hit by Corona. And we're just devastated by his loss. And he was just a big part of all this process that I just described. And working with him every day for 6 years is just very, very hard to accept that he's gone. Yeah, I just want to dedicate that to him, and just wish everybody to stay healthy. And that's it for me. I hope you guys liked it and took information that is useful. As always, you can contact me in this means, whatever emails, Instagram. Go to my website if you want and check out the different means of communication and newsletters, what have you, blog posts. And if you have any questions regarding this or any other topics, I'll be very, very happy to answer. Just give me some time. I always answer to everybody. I just sometimes need some more time. So that's it for me. And if we have any questions now, I'll be happy to answer.
Yeah, Costas, I actually do have a couple of questions here. The first one was, how do you choose the angle that you're going to apply force in isometric concentration exercises? Is it based on athletes' pain limits or something else?
Well, okay, this is a good question. And when I was designing this this talk, I was thinking about what kind, if I should put any videos in, and man, then it would have been too long and too specialized. And isometrics, first of all, you have to decide, obviously, every different injury, put it this way, every muscle has this different isometric position. I use an angle that is pain-free, and then I use all the pain-free angles. So for example, if you have your hamstring, let's say this is your hamstring on the back, you can work the hamstring isometrically by pushing down, right? You resist and push down, and the knee is straight, or you can bend and then push in. This is just an example. You have to work in all these different angles. We use a technique that we apply first for 6 seconds, relax for 6 seconds, go back in for 6 seconds. So it never builds up. You're always in control, but you work in different angles. We actually teach a course on that. We recently did one in Moscow, so on how to work with isometrics. But it's a good question, and so it's a lot to talk about. But you work in different angles, work in pain-free motions and intensities. That would be my answer. If there's any other question, if not.
Yeah, actually, I had a personal question, and
sure.
and this is, I'm not sure, how to ask this, but what happens in a situation where you're working with an athlete and you've set up the rehab plan, you're trying to get them back on the court, but you think that maybe the issue is not necessarily the injury recovery, but it's more of a mental issue. It's just something maybe mentally that is is holding them back from wanting to go back out. How would you advise coaches to kind of address that issue?
First of all, with respect, I've been in this situation many times, and I tell you this: there are guys and girls that their normal is I don't feel any pain. And we know that in sports, this is close to impossible. Everybody has a little bit of a pain, but there are people that are saying, believe it or not, in our level, that they'll say, oh, my butt is sore from squats. Should I practice? Obviously, yes. So number one, if somebody doesn't want to get back, it's crucial, obviously, to understand the reason. Very often, it's because they feel something that we cannot see. And the doctors will, and the pressure, especially in my level, there's a big pressure to say, okay, we have everybody ready. I treated this guy, we healed him, he's ready. It's not my responsibility anymore. And we tend to neglect and ignore the messages they give us. So if somebody doesn't want to go back, maybe it's because she or he feel more pain, or they don't feel stable, or they don't feel ready. They want some more time. The second big part is because it's the fear. They're not, they're afraid, they're in shock. And that's very common, and now you have to approach it with some kind of strategy. The worst thing to do is to get your ass out there and play, because you're gonna face, defense. They're gonna push you back. What I always do, I say, look, what's your name? John. I understand. But my man, we did all these tests. You're sprinting, you run great, you land, everything's fine. Let's do this. Start practicing with a team. And if something goes wrong, raise your hand, look at me, I'll just pull you right out. So right now I'm accepting them. I'm accepting their opinion. I'm accepting their fear. They're at ease. They say, okay, well, let me try. And you know what? If something's wrong, then I'll sit out. So most of the if and that many times breaks that mental block. They feel accepted. They feel safe. They have a safety net that if something happens, they pull you back. I say the coach knows. Don't worry about it. Don't feel bad. Raise your hand. Let's go out. And most of the time, they start practicing. They feel good. They say, okay, I can go a little bit more, and they kind of break their fear by proving to themselves that they are okay. There have been cases though that the pain goes back, and then you know that it's not psychological. But the psychological part is huge. If that persists, I'm obliged to say that you should seek advice from a specialist. You should talk to somebody, some mental coach or psychologist, and see how you're gonna go about that. Because the fear of getting injured again is big, and it's the first big step to the first big obstacle to overcome, especially in serious injuries like ACLs. You get athletes saying, "I cannot imagine myself jumping ever again." I don't know if you ever got hurt, but you get that feeling, how the hell am I going to run again with this leg? This ring is broken. But it's a process, and it's small, wins in this battle. But my main strategy, because of the push of time, is also, talk to them, prove to them that they're okay. And then the third big one is, I accept you, go to practice. If something's wrong, let me know, you come out.
Another, I guess, related part of that, and you mentioned being injured, and just kind of a full disclosure, I actually missed 13 games this year as a coach because of a back injury.
Wow. Yeah.
And one of the things that happened to me during that cycle, being away from the team and being away from my routine, was I started to get into a little bit of a depression. And so, how do you address that with your players, that when they're injured, and depending on the time frame in which they come back, how do you help them, as they, in your area, to help them stay mentally sharp and not to dip into that low? I mean, I know it can't be prevented in some cases, but how do you help those players?
Well, that's a tough one. And that's why I always say, in my line of business and in physios, we need to get seriously involved with learning about psychology. Because, when we first started, we started giving advice of somebody's getting depressed and being said, "Oh, come on, man, you'll be all right," and things like that. And it doesn't work. It goes a lot deeper than we think. But I try to keep them active. I try to give them, first of all, I think, and judging from me, I immediately show my acceptance, that I accept what's happening. It's normal. I tell them it's normal to feel like that. Well, you shouldn't get over, you shouldn't let this beast win. I try to give them small tasks that they can succeed, and that will build up the confidence. I try to stay close to them and understand what's going on, if they sleep at night, if they eat. And this is very important. Sleep is very, very important for the whole process. Give them small tasks, try to talk to them, and try to explain the process, try to explain that this is all very, very normal, what's happening to them. And then just let them build up their, go through that phase of depression, and then acceptance, and then fight back. Because it's kind of like a morning phases that you go. The first one is anger. The first one is disbelief. I can't believe this happened to me. And I had recently one of our guys get an ACL. The first 2-3 days says, I'm in denial. I can't accept this is happening. Well, you have to let the guy tell your player, be in denial. Okay, walk through with them. Then it comes anger. I can't believe, I'm angry. How this thing could ever happen to me. Then is depression. I'm so sad that this happened to me. And then is acceptance. I accept what happened to me. Let's fight. So you have to respect this kind of pattern, and be very vigilant, and not to be stuck on that bottom of depression. Shit, I can never go back. And to do that, you talk to them. I give them small tasks that they can win. Even just let's run up the stairs, things like that. And I never had to talk to a specialist. I never had problems that were so deep. And my experience is, once you get some level of success, then your psychology builds up. You go through that circle of acceptance, anger, and all that, and things get better. I always will recommend, if that persists, talk to a specialist. Don't try to solve things that run deeper in someone's psyche on your own if you're not knowledgeable, if you're not trained. And I've made that mistake a couple of times, and just because you don't know what's going on, you jump into conclusions. So another example, now we go to a different topic, but maybe it's interesting. An athlete gets, always is over, or she is always overweight. They're fat, but they're great. Maybe they're great players or not, doesn't matter, but they always fat. And then you're weak, you don't care. That's our first reaction. Oh, come on, stop eating pizza. Well, if it was that easy, they would have stopped. Well, being fat and getting fat all the time, maybe and most often hides a deeper scar, psychological scar. And you need to see it, and you need to know how to address it, if you must address it, and not stick out to the, oh, you know what, you're weak, you don't care. So things that appear in a certain way and in our lives, and we call somebody that is sad the person that is weird or doesn't smile, but a lot of those behaviors have deeper scars. And if you're not, let's say, trained to do it, if you're not capable of dealing with it, better ask for help.
Excellent points. And I think the big overall message that I've gotten from you in hearing both of your presentations is really we're developing the whole athlete, not just the physical aspects, but also making
Absolutely.
sure that we develop the mental and emotional sides of them as well. So Costas, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule. I hope you have a grepe day celebrating with your family today in Greece.
Thank you so much.
And we'll go ahead and end this session here. And again, everybody, thank you for joining us. Hope to reconnect with you at a later date on another session.
Will, thank you. Take care. Bye-bye. Have a good day.